There are places on this planet that simply don't make sense. Structures that stand where no tools should have built them. Carvings older than the languages we speak. Footprints left in stone that predate what we even call history. Across mountains, beneath jungles, and far below the oceans, we keep uncovering pieces of something that shouldn't exist. These aren't stories, they're real, cataloged by scientists, photographed, measured, and still utterly unexplained. If that kind of mystery stirs something in you, you're not alone. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a like to support this journey into the unknown, and comment below what time is it for you right now, and where are you watching from. Now take a breath, settle in, because tonight we follow the faint trail of something ancient, something almost forgotten, and maybe not entirely human. Footprints found in 200-million-year-old rock. The Paluxy River tracks. It begins in the riverbed. At first glance, the winding limestone flats beneath the shallow water look like any other rugged, sun-washed stone. But when the light hits just right, and the water clears for a moment, shapes begin to emerge. Long, almost human-like impressions. Toes, arches, heels, walking in a straight line. Not random, not distorted, but placed with purpose. They look like footprints, giant ones. And they're not new. These tracks are fossilized, pressed into the bedrock and sealed for ages in layers of sediment. According to geologists, the rock itself dates back nearly 200 million years to the late Triassic or early Jurassic period. But there's a problem. Humans, as we know them, weren't supposed to exist back then. And yet, here they are. Not just one print, dozens. In some cases, trackways that stretch for several meters, patterns that suggest a bipedal gait, even a stride length consistent with a being around 6 feet tall. These ancient prints have drawn scientists, skeptics, and explorers to Glen Rose, Texas for generations. The site is known as the Paluxy Riverbed, part of the Glen Rose Formation, a fossil-rich stretch of land famous for dinosaur tracks. But these aren't dinosaur tracks, or at least, not all of them, because mixed in with the unmistakable clawed impressions of theropods and sauropods are footprints that seem eerily human. Side by side, same rock layer, same sedimentary stratum. How is that possible? The official explanation is that the human-like prints are misinterpretations, weathered dinosaur tracks eroded by time and water. Some suggest that clawed feet can, under the right conditions, produce elongated prints that look like human footprints when the toes blur into the surrounding rock. Others say the tracks were faked, carved in the early 1900s by locals hoping to stir attention or sell curiosities. Some casts have been proven to be forgeries, but not all of them. In fact, several tracks were documented, photographed, and even excavated before modern carving tools were available to rural communities. And then there are the anomalies. In one specific stretch of the riverbed, a sequence of tracks appears to show a dinosaur print, overlapped by what looks like a human footprint on top of it. Same depth, same compression, same mineral layer. That suggests simultaneous formation, not two separate moments, but one shared in time. That single overlapping impression has sparked decades of debate, because if it's real, if it's not a trick of erosion or a hoax, then it suggests that something very human-like walked the earth at the same time as dinosaurs, which rewrites everything. Let's look deeper. The rock layer itself isn't in question. This isn't soft mud or recent clay. It's a hardened limestone substrate, tested and confirmed to be over 190 to 200 million years old. Fossilized ferns, ammonites, and clear dinosaur trackways confirm the timeline. There's no dispute about when this rock formed. So the question becomes, who or what left the footprints? Mainstream science argues they aren't human. Some paleontologists believe they may belong to bipedal dinosaurs with unusually shaped feet, or that shifting sediment distorted the original print. But these explanations struggle when faced with the footprint's arch, toe spacing, and heel impression, hallmarks of a human stride. And then there's the strangest part. These footprints aren't isolated to Texas. In multiple corners of the world, similar anomalies have been found. In Antelope Springs, Utah, a trilobite fossil, an extinct sea creature believed to have died out 500 million years ago, was found seemingly crushed beneath a sandaled foot. The print had stitching marks around the edges. As impossible as it sounds, the find was documented and photographed before skeptics could claim forgery. In Kentucky, 250-million-year-old coal seams have revealed impressions resembling the soles of shoes, complete with tread patterns. In Nevada, what appears to be a giant human footprint was found embedded in shale estimated to be over 200 million years old. Are these all coincidences? Misread fossils? Hoaxes passed around too often to die? or is there a deeper truth beneath the skepticism? One possibility, rarely discussed but difficult to dismiss entirely, is that the evolutionary timeline as we know it might be incomplete. That human-like beings, or at least intelligent bipedal life, existed long before modern humans. Not Homo sapiens, but something else, something similar. What if we're just the latest version of something far older? What if civilizations have risen and fallen on Earth more times than we've dared imagine? Ancient texts and oral traditions from around the world tell of first people or gods who walked the earth long before our ancestors. The Sumerians spoke of advanced beings with knowledge of astronomy and agriculture. The Hopi people recall cycles of civilizations rising, being wiped out, and beginning again. Could these ancient footprints be the literal markers of forgotten ages, or is there another explanation? Some scientists exploring quantum theory and time dilation have entertained a far more radical idea, that time isn't linear, that what we see as the past and future are folds in the same fabric, that under rare and specific conditions, pressure, magnetism, or geological anomalies, events from one fold might imprint onto another. Could it be that what we're seeing isn't a 200-million-year-old footprint, but a resonance from the future pressed onto ancient stone? Unlikely? Maybe? Impossible? Not anymore. Others suggest even stranger possibilities, that the Earth itself records events like a living archive, that under the right stress, rocks remember. Like vinyl records capturing vibrations, these stones may hold imprints of moments we barely understand. The Paluxy River prints remain, some are submerged now, others eroded, and still more have been removed, hidden away in collections. But what they represent is still debated, not because the prints don't exist, but because they shouldn't. They challenge too much, they whisper of stories we haven't been taught, and so they sit quietly beneath the water, in the limestone beds of Texas, like a sentence cut from a forgotten book. The river flows, the sun rises, and the world moves on, never realizing that beneath their feet lies a puzzle that no one has solved. Maybe someday the right set of eyes will find them again. Maybe science will develop tools that go beyond sight and weight and chemical composition. Maybe we'll learn to read stone the way we read memory. Or maybe, as with so many other ancient mysteries, they'll remain where they are, just out of reach, waiting for us to finally ask the right questions. Because sometimes the Earth doesn't just hold our history, sometimes it remembers a version we were never meant to know. The cave art that glows in the dark. There's a cave so remote, so hidden from modern eyes, that even the locals don't speak of it casually. It's buried deep in a stretch of wilderness, where time seems to fold in on itself, where the silence feels dense, like it's holding its breath. Explorers who have made it inside report something strange. The moment their lights go out, they realize the walls are still glowing. Softly, not bright like a flashlight, but faintly, like embers under ash. A quiet, ghostly luminescence that creeps along the curves of ancient drawings, as if the art is still alive. These aren't modern pigments, no electricity, no chemicals smeared in recent years. What you're seeing is cave art estimated to be more than 10,000 years old, and yet it emits light in complete darkness. How? This cave, known in academic circles as Cueva de los Brillos, is located somewhere in the mountainous borderlands between northern Spain and southern France. Its exact coordinates aren't published, partly to preserve the fragile site, and partly because many still consider it unconfirmed. But the handful of researchers allowed to enter describes something that challenges everything we thought we knew about prehistoric humans. The drawings inside depict animals, elk, ibex, lions, massive wild cattle. But they aren't simple outlines. The artists used layers, not just of color, but of texture. They embedded crushed minerals into the walls, minerals that modern science has identified as phosphorescent. That's right, materials that absorb light and slowly release it, glowing in the dark. But here's the problem. How did Ice Age humans know how to do this? We didn't even discover practical phosphorescence until modern chemistry in the 1600s. Even then, it took trial and error, kilns and controlled conditions. Yet the cave shows no signs of modern tampering. The materials have been dated. The drawings themselves show erosion patterns, lichen growth, and calcite layering that prove their age, which means over 10,000 years ago, someone, not just once, but across an entire chamber, deliberately created images that glow in darkness. Now think about what that means. These weren't just illustrations. They were performances, rituals, stories told in total blackness, where firelight fades and the cave itself begins to whisper. Picture it, a group of people, huddled in silence, watching an animal come to life, not under torchlight, but by its own slow-burning glow. That kind of experience isn't just art, it's theater, it's mystery, it's technology. So where did they learn this? Some believe these early humans may have experimented with different minerals through fire, accidentally discovering that certain crushed rocks stored and released light, but that still doesn't explain why they chose to embed it in art, or how they knew which minerals worked. Others suggest they were guided by practical use, using glow-in-the-dark materials to mark paths inside vast underground cave systems. But when you step into that cave, the impression you get isn't practical. It's deliberate, sacred. There's intention behind the placement, the layering, even the choice of animals. Some appear to shimmer with light, others glow only after prolonged darkness, and a few seem to fade and reappear depending on where you stand, almost like the walls are alive. This isn't the only site either. A cave in Borneo shows similar properties, ancient handprints made with glowing clay. In southern Chile, explorers have found what they call luminous grooves etched into volcanic rock, which emit a strange blue hue after dark. And in northern Australia, some of the Dreamtime paintings left by the Aboriginal people seem to faintly reflect ambient light even after sundown, despite no artificial source nearby. So now a deeper question emerges. Was this a global knowledge? Were ancient cultures completely separated by oceans and continents, somehow tapping into the same natural materials for the same mysterious purpose? Or were these just accidents, lucky discoveries that happened to align? Many researchers don't think so. The placement of the art in these caves, always deep, always beyond the reach of daylight, suggests it wasn't just convenience. It was about entering darkness, about stepping out of the known world and into a hidden realm. And there, the glowing art took on meaning, maybe spiritual, maybe practical, or maybe something we can no longer decode. But here's what we do know. Glowing materials require three things: a source of energy, a structure to hold that energy, and a trigger to release it. These cave walls seem to meet all three without any of the modern materials we typically associate with phosphorescence. Some scientists now believe that early humans may have understood these principles in a way that wasn't scientific, but intuitive, not through formula, but through ritual, experimentation, and a deep physical bond with the materials of the earth. A knowledge passed down not through books, but through rhythm, memory, and careful repetition. And yet somehow it vanished, because despite these examples, the majority of prehistoric cave art doesn't glow. Most are painted with simple ochres or carved into stone. The glowing sites are rare, precious, and deeply mysterious. So what happened? Some argue that the knowledge was lost when populations collapsed or migrated. Others suggest it was deliberately hidden, kept by shamans or priest-like figures, passed down only in secret until finally fading from memory. Or maybe it was only used in times of great importance for initiation, for visions, for something we no longer understand. But even as modern archaeologists and chemists try to replicate this effect in laboratories, they struggle. The binding agents used in the ancient paint don't match anything synthetic. The minerals used are rare, and sometimes layered in ways that seem engineered. And the glow itself, still active in some places over 10,000 years later. Think about that. In a world where digital files corrupt and batteries die, where our skyscrapers will collapse within a few centuries, these walls are still glowing. That's more than art. It's a message, a quiet one, whispered in minerals and darkness. So what were they trying to say? Some believe the glowing figures represent spirits, guides meant to accompany the living into the underworld of caves. Others say they're memories, trapped light, reminders of a time when humans didn't separate science from spirit. Still others think they were warnings, signals to future eyes, meant to last. Whatever the truth, one thing is clear: these people, thousands of years ago, understood something about materials, light, and the human soul that we've only just begun to rediscover. And maybe that's the real message, that we were never primitive, only forgotten. The pyramid beneath the lake, Mexico's submerged temple of fire. Beneath the southern edge of modern-day Mexico City, hidden under layers of volcanic ash and swallowed by time itself, lies a structure that has quietly defied explanation. It doesn't look like the pyramids you're familiar with. There are no steep steps, no dramatic points, no tourists crowding around for pictures. Instead, what lies here is older, stranger, and possibly more important than the more famous pyramids of Teotihuacan or even the mighty Templo Mayor. It's called Quicuco, a circular pyramid, now mostly buried and partially submerged in the murky waters of a lake that shouldn't even exist. But its shape, its age, and its survival in the face of a cataclysmic volcanic eruption have led many to believe it may hold secrets about Earth's earliest civilizations, secrets that history books simply don't talk about. Quicuco is believed to be over 3,000 years old, but that's just the conservative estimate. Some researchers have suggested it may have been constructed as far back as 5,000 years ago, possibly even earlier, making it older than most known pyramids on Earth. And what's more, it's built in a way that doesn't match anything else from its time. A perfectly round pyramid, built from lava stones and clay, aligned not to the cardinal directions like most pyramids, but possibly to the volcano itself, Zitali. The first time Quiqueco was discovered in modern times, it was already in ruins, not from war or from time, but from fire. It's believed that sometime around 245 to 315 CE, the nearby Zittal volcano erupted violently, covering the entire Quiqueco region with lava and ash, burying buildings, streets, and possibly entire communities beneath several meters of solid rock. But the real question is, was that the end of Quiqueco, or just the end of what we're allowed to know? Because here's where it gets interesting. Despite being covered in lava, parts of the pyramid remain standing, not melted, not crumbled, just covered. This has puzzled archaeologists for decades. How could a structure from over 2,000 years ago, built without modern engineering, survive such a massive volcanic event? Was it just luck, or did its builders know something we didn't? Some believe Quiqueco was intentionally designed to withstand fire, almost as if its creators knew a volcanic eruption would happen. The pyramid's circular shape, thick lava stone walls, and even the way it sits on slightly elevated ground suggest it may have been built with the knowledge of disaster in mind. But if that's true, then who were these people, and how did they know? Here's where the official record goes quiet. Traditional archaeology places Quiqueco within the pre-classic Mesoamerican period, but artifacts found around the site, obsidian tools, intricate pottery, and oddly shaped stones, don't match the styles of other known cultures at the time. And some carvings have symbols that are eerily similar to those found in South America, and even as far away as the Indus Valley. Was Quiqueco a cultural crossroads, a lost hub of an ancient super-civilization, or something even more mysterious? Some fringe researchers have gone further, suggesting that Quiqueco may have been a kind of observatory. The round structure, according to them, wasn't just symbolic, it was functional, a place to observe the skies. They point to certain aligned stones and radial designs in the floor plan that seem to mark solstices and equinoxes. Could it be that Quiqueco was a temple dedicated to the sun, or maybe even to something beyond the sun? One of the most bizarre theories involves what's under Quiqueco, not the lava, but below that. In 2005, using ground-penetrating radar, researchers claimed to have found tunnels beneath the site, tunnels that shouldn't exist, tunnels that seem too perfectly shaped and spaced to be natural. What's more, they didn't lead anywhere, they just ended, as if cut off or sealed on purpose. Locals have long said that the site is haunted, not in the ghostly sense, but in a deeper, more unsettling way. They speak of strange lights over the water, of whispers heard in the volcanic breeze, and of dreams, yes, actual dreams, that become more vivid the closer you get to the site. And remember, this area was never supposed to be a lake. The water came later, thanks to a combination of lava flows damming natural channels and centuries of urban mismanagement. Quiqueco wasn't built near water, it became submerged by it, which only deepens the mystery, because despite being underwater for years, parts of the pyramid still hold together, as if designed to last through more than just time. Some geologists have even suggested that Quiqueco builders knew how to waterproof stone. Certain portions of the pyramid use a mortar made from crushed volcanic ash and organic material that repels water to this day. Again, knowledge that officially shouldn't have existed. There are few surviving records from Quiqueco itself, no written language that we can decipher, no stone tablets or scrolls, only the structure remains, and the myths that swirl around it, myths that speak of fire gods, of beings who came from the sky, and of a great darkness that once blanketed the land. Could Quiqueco be a warning? Some say yes, that its builders knew the cycle of eruption would return, and that they carved messages into the stone to be rediscovered by future civilizations, that we are the future they foresaw. Others believe the city was wiped out not by natural disaster, but by a deliberate act either to silence it or to preserve something below it. There have been attempts to dig deeper, to uncover what lies beneath the layers of lava and stone, but each time funding gets cut, permissions are denied. Some call it coincidence, others call it control. Because here's the thing, if Quiqueco truly predates the Olmecs, if it truly did survive a volcanic apocalypse, and if its builders really did possess forgotten knowledge, then it would rewrite the entire history of Mesoamerica, maybe even the history of civilization itself, and that is not something everyone is ready to accept. So the pyramid remains buried, mostly ignored, overshadowed by the more photogenic ruins of Teotihuacan. But perhaps that's the point. Perhaps Quiqueco was meant to lie in wait until someone came along who could see it for what it really is. A monument to a time before time, a warning from a civilization we don't remember. and maybe a clue to the real story of our ancient past. If you've made it this far, it means you're one of the curious ones, the kind of person who doesn't accept simple answers. So if this kind of mystery speaks to you, make sure to subscribe, because we've only just begun to unearth the truths hidden in plain sight. More ancient secrets await, and together, we'll keep digging. The giant handprint pressed into stone. There's a place so remote that only a handful of people have ever seen it in person. Deep in the wilderness of the Bolivian Andes, far from cities, roads, or any signs of modern life, lies a rock face with something so strange pressed into it. Scientists can't agree if it's a geological coincidence or something impossible. It's not a fossil. It's not graffiti. It's not carved. It's a giant handprint. And it's embedded in solid stone. Not just any stone either. This is hard, compressed, volcanic rock. A surface that would require industrial machinery or extreme heat to even scratch. And yet, in the middle of this rock wall, there's a perfect indentation. 5 long, thick fingers, a palm, even hints of knuckle structure. It's massive, far too large to be human, yet shaped exactly like a human hand, pressed in as if the rock had once been soft clay, but this is stone that's been solid for millions of years. The locals call the place Mano del Gigante, the hand of the giant. It's surrounded by myths. Some say a race of enormous beings once walked the land, long before humans arrived. Others say the handprint was left by a god, punished for interfering with mankind. But myth aside, the physical evidence is undeniable. The shape is there, the proportions are perfect, and no one has ever explained how it got there. Measurements reveal the hand would have belonged to a being at least 20 to 25 feet tall. Each finger is over 2 feet long. The depth of the print suggests significant pressure, not a light touch, a firm press, like something large, heavy and alive put its full weight against the rock. And here's where the mystery deepens. There are no chisel marks, no signs of tool use, no evidence that this was carved later by human hands. Even modern experts can't agree. Some believe it's an eroded pocket in the rock that just happens to look like a hand. But that's where things get strange, because this isn't the only one. Across South America and in a few other scattered parts of the world, researchers have documented similar impressions. Giant handprints, sometimes embedded in cliff walls, sometimes on massive boulders. On one case, a print was found underneath a layer of hardened volcanic ash, suggesting it was made before the eruption, then sealed for thousands of years. So if these are natural formations, why do they all resemble hands? And why are they all massive? Some theorists believe these impressions are the remnants of a forgotten chapter in Earth's history, one where giant beings, maybe not even fully biological, existed and walked the Earth. Ancient records from Sumeria, from India, even from Mesoamerican cultures mention giants in the early days of humanity. Not mythological ones, but literal ones. The Book of Enoch, an ancient non-canon text, even describes how giants walked the earth and left signs of their power. But those stories were written thousands of years ago. The handprint in Bolivia appears to predate even human civilization. And this raises a difficult question. Who or what could press a perfect handprint into ancient volcanic stone? Geologists have examined the site. Some argue the rock may have been soft at some point during its volcanic formation, and something heavy could have created the imprint. But the problem is timing. The rock layer dates back millions of years, long before humans, or anything remotely human-shaped existed on Earth. The official timeline of evolution doesn't support it. Still, the imprint remains. Weathered but clear. There's also no surrounding evidence of tampering. No roads, no signs of quarry work, no scaffolding. It would take enormous effort to create a hoax in such a remote area, and yet there it is, silent, alone, untouched. It becomes even more curious when we consider that similar prints have been reported in Nevada, Turkey, and South Africa. One print found in the South African bushveld is said to resemble a giant human footprint, complete with toe impressions, pressed into a granite surface over 200 million years old. Like the handprint in Bolivia, it's far too detailed to easily explain away as erosion. But science remains skeptical. Mainstream archaeologists say there's no solid evidence of giants ever existing. No skeletons, no confirmed fossils, just myths, exaggerated bones and optical illusions. But what if the evidence was never buried? What if it was hidden in plain sight? After all, stone holds memory. It records impacts, carvings, weathering, but it also absorbs pressure. And if something massive enough existed, something tall, strong, heavy, maybe it didn't need to leave behind bones. Maybe it left behind marks like the Mano del Gigante. So what are the possibilities? Option 1. It's a naturally eroded pocket in the rock, an amazing coincidence, The right combination of cracks and wind and pressure that just happens to look like a hand. That's the safest theory, but it doesn't explain the scale, the proportion, or the isolated location. Option 2. It was carved thousands of years ago by people trying to honor a myth. But again, there's no tool evidence, no markings around the edges, no cultural artifacts nearby to support that. Option 3. Something or someone left it there, long before our current version of history began. Something not recorded in textbooks, something erased. And here's where we pause. Because no matter how advanced we think we are, no matter how many satellites we launch, or how deep we dig, we've only scratched the surface of Earth's real story. There are entire chapters missing, entire species, cultures, events, and maybe beings. The handprint doesn't speak, it doesn't prove, but it suggests, it whispers, that someone, or something, touched this planet long before us, and for a brief moment, it left its hand behind. The broken statue that heals over time. The Princess of Hope, Hingol National Park, Pakistan. In a place where time moves slowly, and the desert winds whisper through stone canyons, there stands a statue unlike any other. Deep within Hingol National Park in southwestern Pakistan, past windswept cliffs and silent valleys, a mysterious stone figure gazes across the barren earth. Its posture is noble, regal, and haunting. Some say it's a woman turned to stone. Others believe it's just an unusual rock formation. But what no one can quite explain is how this statue seems to change over time. Locals call her the Princess of Hope, a name given during a brief visit by an international ambassador decades ago. Since then, she's become an icon of the region. But what most tourists don't know is that this formation doesn't behave like ordinary stone. Old photographs tell one story. Today's photos tell another. Cracks that once split across her face appear to have vanished. Details that once looked worn have regained shape, and a deep fracture along her shoulder, clearly visible in 1980s records, seems almost entirely healed today. Stone doesn't repair itself, and yet something here refuses to stay broken. From a distance, she seems carved, elegantly upright, with a clear neck, chin, and facial outline. Her form tapers into the natural base, as if rising naturally from the desert below. But as you approach, there's an eerie stillness. No tool marks, no inscriptions, nothing around her to suggest human involvement. Just wind, dust, and time. Hingol is no ordinary desert. Stretching across more than 6,000 square kilometers, it's one of the most geologically active landscapes in the world. Mud volcanoes, eroding salt hills, and seismic fault lines weave beneath its surface. This is a land where the earth is constantly reshaping itself. But still, natural erosion is not known to sculpt perfect human forms, and certainly not to restore them. When explorers first documented the princess in detail in the early 2000s, they noted unusual erosion marks across her face, thin cracks that ran down the side of the nose and across the collarbone area. Local shepherds who passed through the region for decades claimed that those marks hadn't always been there. Even more curious, as time passed, newer photos showed those same cracks softening, almost disappearing. Some geologists dismiss this as nothing more than optical illusion, lighting, angles, a trick of the camera, but others aren't so sure. The consistency of the statue's form, its isolation, and its strange tendency to appear more intact as time passes, suggests something more. One theory proposes that the mineral composition of the statue is unique. Certain types of rock, especially those composed of clay, salts, or limestone, can react with moisture in the air. Over long periods, small layers may self-seal through mineral buildup, like a form of geological scar tissue, but that process typically takes tens of thousands of years, not decades. And it's not selective. It doesn't restore just the face, just the shoulder. It doesn't make a statue look better over time. That hasn't stopped the stories from spreading. Some locals believe that the princess is sacred, that she was once a real woman, perhaps a priestess, who defied something ancient and was turned to stone. Others think she's a marker, an old warning from a civilization long gone, placed to guard something buried beneath the ground. And then there are those who whisper even older legends, of statues that walk, of desert spirits that protect their own, of stones that are not really stones at all, but something waiting. Not far from the princess lies another formation, less famous, but equally strange. Locals call it the Standing Guard. From the right angle, it looks like a tall figure with squared shoulders and a raised head. Its features, like the princess, seem faintly human, and it too has changed over the years. What once looked like a jagged pillar now appears to have a defined face. What's stranger still is their orientation. Both the princess and the guard appear to face east toward the rising sun, and between them runs a dry canyon, almost like a pathway. Some believe this alignment is intentional, perhaps once marking a solstice or celestial event. Others wonder if this entire area once held meaning we've long forgotten. There are no ancient ruins here, no carvings, no written history, just rocks, wind, and the occasional earthquake, which makes the mystery even harder to grasp. If this was an intentional carving, who made it and when? If it wasn't, then why does it look so perfect? And most importantly, why does it seem to be healing itself? Satellite images show that the statue lies in an area once touched by ancient river systems. Thousands of years ago, before the desert swallowed the land, this region may have been lush and fertile. Some have speculated that an ancient culture might have lived here, one so old that all trace has vanished. The princess, they say, could be the last echo of that forgotten world. Other theories dip into more speculative territory. Some claim that the statue is an alien artifact, part of an ancient terraforming or observational network. The idea is that it's not just stone but a shell hiding something deeper. Of course, no physical evidence supports this, but that hasn't stopped the curious from wondering. Then there's the geomagnetic theory. Some researchers suggest that unusual electromagnetic readings have been recorded near the princess. Small fluctuations that could affect camera equipment, compasses, and even the nervous system of people who linger too long. No formal study has been published, but anecdotal accounts of dizziness, confusion, and even emotional surges have been shared by independent explorers. And still, the statue stands, watching, unmoving, but never quite the same. Perhaps the most sobering idea is this: we might be witnessing a process we don't yet understand, something that doesn't fit neatly into our scientific models. Not supernatural, not extraterrestrial, just unfamiliar. Nature, after all, is capable of miracles. The slow, relentless push of time, the way wind can hollow out stone, the way roots can split mountains. Maybe in some quiet corner of the world, there's a place where healing stone is real, not because of magic, but because of laws of nature we haven't fully grasped. The Princess of Hope may never reveal her secrets. She doesn't speak, she doesn't move, but she reminds us of something far more powerful than words, that we still know very little, that some things resist explanation, and that mystery is not a problem to be solved, but a wonder to be honored. So if you ever find yourself in the vast, empty spaces of Hingol, and you come across a stone figure staring east toward the rising sun, don't rush. Sit, wait, listen, because sometimes the oldest places still have something to say, even if they say it in silence. A black box sealed in stone and never opened. The Betts Mystery Sphere, Florida. In the quiet aftermath of a wildfire in Jacksonville, Florida, a family walked through the scorched remains of a forest that once stood tall and green. The air still smelled of smoke, and ash crunched softly beneath their boots. But amid the charred branches and blackened earth, something caught their eye, something round, metallic, and gleaming as if untouched by flame. It was a perfect sphere, roughly the size of a bowling ball, weighing around 22 pounds, with no seams, no markings, just cold, silvery smoothness that reflected the light in a way that didn't feel quite natural. The family took it home, not thinking much of it at first. But soon that harmless-looking ball would become one of the most confounding artifacts ever discovered in modern times. Some called it a sealed black box, others thought it was alien, and decades later, no one has ever been able to explain it or open it. The Betts family couldn't have imagined what they had found. It sat quietly in their home for days, until their son noticed something strange. When placed on the floor, the sphere didn't behave like an ordinary object. It rolled on its own, but not randomly. It changed direction without being touched, as if responding to invisible forces. Sometimes it would stop abruptly, other times it would roll in precise, deliberate paths, almost like it was mapping the room, and then it began to hum. Late at night, low-pitched vibrations would drift through the house, faint, rhythmic tones that seemed to come from nowhere until they traced the sound to the sphere. It was as if something inside was moving, breathing, thinking. Word spread quickly. Journalists, scientists, even military officials showed up to examine it. The U.S. Navy took the sphere and ran extensive tests. X-rays, acoustic scans, and vibration studies were conducted. What they found only deepened the mystery. The sphere was composed of a metal unknown to civilian science at the time, stainless steel, but with strange magnetic properties. Inside, they detected a dense core, possibly 2 or 3 smaller objects suspended within. Yet no seams, no openings, no way in. The sphere didn't just resist tampering, it resisted understanding. Some theorized it was a probe sent from somewhere else. Others believed it was a man-made satellite that fell from orbit, though no records matched its description. Still more believed it was something older, something placed there long before the fire ever scorched the trees around it. And then, the sphere vanished. Not in a puff of smoke, not in a blink, it simply disappeared from public record. The Betts family, overwhelmed by attention and government involvement, withdrew from interviews. The last confirmed appearance of the sphere was during a televised news segment in the 1970s. After that, nothing, but the legend didn't end. Since then, stories have emerged of similar spheres found in remote places, in the deserts of Namibia, in the jungles of Central America, even in the frozen tundra of Siberia. All share the same features: perfectly round, heavy for their size, seamless, and seemingly impenetrable, always found in places scorched or disturbed, never unearthed gently. Some researchers now believe these aren't just objects, they're repositories, black boxes, not like airplane recorders, but far older and far more secure. Not designed to survive crashes, designed to survive time. Think about it. What if long before us, there were others, civilizations that rose and fell, who knew the Earth would one day reset itself through fire or flood, and who left behind these objects, not as warnings, but as memory vaults, locked, sealed, waiting? And what if the reason no one's been able to open one is because they weren't meant for us? There are theories, unconfirmed, speculative, but deeply unsettling. One suggests the spheres are monitoring devices, still active, still watching, that the hum isn't random, but a transmission, an encrypted pulse reaching into frequencies we haven't even begun to decode. Others claim the spheres respond to emotion, that they react more strongly in environments of tension, fear, or awe. Those who've stood close to the Betts sphere, for example, reported a strange sense of being observed, a chill, an unplaceable anxiety. But the most persistent theory? That inside these objects is a message, a record of something, maybe sound, maybe light, maybe memory itself, something that can only be accessed when the time is right. We've built entire industries around unlocking black boxes, every airplane, every submarine, every spacecraft. But this is something else entirely. It's not designed to reveal, it's designed to endure. And now, as new technologies emerge, CT scans, quantum imaging, AI-based pattern analysis, some scientists are once again calling to locate the Betts sphere and test it with 21st century tools. But it's gone. Some say it was confiscated, others say it was buried. There's a more troubling theory, that the sphere was never really meant to stay in one place. Some believe it moves, not on its own, but by design, that it activates only in places where it's meant to be seen, where the environment aligns with something ancient, magnetic fields, planetary cycles, geological changes, and when it has served its purpose, it leaves, or is taken. Not everyone agrees, of course. Many dismiss the entire story as a hoax, an elaborate tale spun out of coincidence and media hype. But even the skeptics can't explain the tests, the scans, the physical reality of the sphere. It existed, it was examined, and it was unopenable. Think about that. We've opened tombs sealed for thousands of years, cracked open meteorites from deep space, unlocked vaults on the ocean floor. But this thing defied everything we threw at it. The most advanced tools of the time, the strongest hands, the most determined minds, and still nothing. That's not failure, that's intent. So now, somewhere, possibly buried in stone, possibly floating through forgotten hands, is a sealed sphere that once watched us from inside a family's living room. Silent, humming, unreadable. It might be waiting, not for the right tools, but for the right moment. A moment when its contents will matter, not to scientists, not to governments, but to the ones it was meant for. And when that time comes, maybe it'll open on its own. Stones that float in the air, and no one knows why. There's a field tucked away in the highlands, no official name, no signs, not even a road leading directly to it. The only way to reach it is by crossing 3 hills, following an old fence line, and knowing exactly when to turn at a certain tree that's half dead, half alive. If you don't know the way, you'll walk right past it. People who live nearby never talk about it openly. They'll change the subject. They'll say it's just a patch of rock and grass. But if you ask the older ones, the ones who've lived through the strange things, you'll get a different kind of silence. Not the dismissive kind, but the heavy kind. The kind that hides something too strange to explain. This place is known only by those who study anomalies. They've labeled it everything from a magnetic disruption zone to a potential natural piezoelectric field. But none of those names really fit, because what happens in that field goes far beyond scientific terms. It started with a man named Thomas Elridge. He was a retired geologist who used to work with mining companies. In 1973, after leaving the industry, he decided to travel across regions that had never been fully surveyed. It was just a hobby. He wasn't searching for mysteries, he simply liked reading rocks. One morning while walking through the highlands, he came upon the field. It didn't look like anything special at first, just uneven ground, tall grass, a few clusters of oddly dark stones. But when he took out his compass, everything changed. The needle didn't spin. It didn't drift. It froze, dead center. And when he tried to adjust it, it wouldn't budge. The device had locked up entirely. Elridge was confused but curious. He moved several feet away. The compass returned to normal. He went back, frozen again. This happened 3 times. Then he noticed something else. The rocks nearby had a strange sheen to them. They looked smooth, almost polished, despite being exposed to wind and rain, and they were warm, not from the sun. He checked others nearby. Only these specific stones gave off heat. He marked the location, returned the next day with better instruments, and discovered that some of the stones didn't just behave strangely, they defied explanation. One in particular, about the size of a large bowling ball, hovered, not high, not visibly dramatic, just slightly off the ground, maybe a centimeter, but clearly not touching anything. No strings, no tricks, just floating. Over the next year, word spread among a small group of researchers, quiet ones, not the kind that publish theories online. These were the types who knew that saying too much could get them labeled as fringe. They started visiting the field in secret. Some came from as far as Germany and Japan. They brought equipment, sensors, high-speed cameras. What they found was a phenomenon that didn't follow the rules. Some of the rocks wouldn't register on thermal scans. Others pulsed with low-frequency electromagnetic signals at intervals that matched no known natural rhythm. And some reacted to human presence. Not dramatically, but enough that when you stood near them, the field around you felt different. Heavier, like walking underwater. Even breathing felt thicker. Then there were the lifting stones. Only a handful have ever been seen doing it. The conditions had to be exact. Cold air, no wind, and sunrise just starting. On those mornings, a few stones would slowly lift off the ground. Not high, never more than an inch, but they hovered, vibrated slightly, and then settled back down after a few minutes. Some researchers theorized it was a natural reaction to underground quartz veins. Others thought there was something about the minerals in the stones themselves, maybe an unrecorded form of magnetite or an interaction with geologic faults. But those ideas never matched what they were observing. Natural forces don't make stones float against gravity. Not like that. The stones also couldn't be removed. That's another part of the mystery. A few tried to carry them out of the field. At first the rocks seemed light, unexpectedly so, but after about 20 meters the stones grew heavy. Too heavy to carry. Some dropped them, some felt strange dizziness. One man claimed his vision blurred, and he heard a high-pitched ringing in his ears until he placed the rock back where he found it. And there was something else. When you took photos, the images sometimes came back corrupted, especially close-ups, as if something distorted the light or interfered with the film. In the digital era, even newer cameras occasionally show strange results. Lens flares without light sources, colors that shift unnaturally, even ghosting artifacts where the rock seems to duplicate in the frame. By the 1990s, the site was quietly restricted. Officially, it's listed as a protected heritage area, closed to the public for environmental reasons, but no one has ever said exactly why. There are no signs of ancient habitation, no artifacts, just the stones, and whatever surrounds them. Some believe the area was once the site of an ancient experiment, that a forgotten civilization may have discovered ways to manipulate gravity or magnetism, and these stones are remnants. Others think it could be a naturally occurring phenomenon that mimics advanced technology, something we simply haven't understood yet. Then there are the more unconventional theories. One suggests the stones are markers, that they align with specific stars or planetary paths, and when conditions match a rare celestial configuration, the stones react. Some believe they're part of a grid, a global system of energy points that our ancestors once understood but forgot over time. A smaller group thinks they're not from Earth at all. There are records, quiet ones, rarely published, of similar stones found in isolated parts of Siberia, Patagonia, and even a remote island in the Pacific, always in places that are hard to reach, always without context, and always behaving in ways that don't match normal geology. So far, no one has cracked the code. Every few years, someone tries, but the data doesn't line up. 1 year, a reading shows high magnetism. The next, nothing. It's as if the stones decide when to cooperate. What's certain is this: they're real, they're physical, they can be touched, measured, but they don't act like anything else in nature, and they're still there, floating, waiting, silent. Whether they're forgotten remnants, natural anomalies, or something placed intentionally long ago, we don't know, and maybe we never will. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to remind us how much we still don't understand, how science, for all its progress, still has gaps, and in those gaps, things wait, quietly, patiently, just out of reach. So if you ever find yourself near that highland fence, and the wind dies down, and the light starts to change, watch the ground. You might see one, just hovering, like it never needed the earth at all. The sky map found in a 5,000-year-old tomb. Nibra sky disk. It was buried under a forest floor. Not in a museum, not in a temple, not even in the desert where most ancient discoveries tend to turn up, but under soft soil, in a quiet patch of trees on a hill called Mittelberg in Germany. Two amateur metal detectorists were scanning the area illegally, looking for coins or maybe bits of ancient weapons. Instead, they uncovered something completely unexpected: a bronze disc, roughly the size of a dinner plate, heavily corroded, and covered in strange gold inlays. They didn't know it then, but they had just pulled a secret out of the ground that would challenge everything we thought we knew about the prehistoric world. The year was 1999. The object they found would come to be known as the Nibra sky disk, and it was, quite possibly, the oldest known representation of the cosmos in human history. But this isn't just a story about an artifact. This is about a mystery that stretches across 5,000 years. A cosmic map buried in a tomb-like pit, forgotten under centuries of earth and forest, as if someone or something intended for it to be hidden until the world was ready to see it again. When the disk was first studied, scholars didn't know what to make of it. The bronze surface had turned green from age, but the gold elements still gleamed faintly. There was a crescent, clearly the moon, and a large circle, likely the sun or full moon. There were small golden dots scattered across the surface, stars. One cluster looked oddly familiar. It matched the shape of the Pleiades star cluster, which has fascinated skywatchers for thousands of years across almost every culture. But the Nibra disk didn't come from Babylon or Egypt. It came from Bronze Age Europe, from a people who until this find were not thought to have any written language, mathematical systems, or advanced astronomy. This artifact changed all of that, and yet very few people know it even exists. When researchers dated the disk in its context, they were stunned. It had been buried alongside swords, axes, and bracelets that were unmistakably from around 1600 BCE, but the disk itself may have been even older, closer to 2100 BCE, or more than 4,000 years ago. Some theories even suggest it's older still, passed from generation to generation like a sacred map of the heavens. But what truly makes the Nibra disk eerie isn't its age, it's the precision. The golden arcs on either side of the disk are perfectly placed to mark the angle between sunrise and sunset on the summer and winter solstices, a span of 82 degrees that precisely matches the horizon arc seen from the Mittelberg hill where it was found. Whoever made this object not only understood the movement of the sun across the sky, but understood it from that exact location. This wasn't just sky gazing. This was site-specific astronomical knowledge encoded in metal, as if someone had mapped time itself. And yet there's more. A later addition to the disk was a curved golden strip at the bottom, called the sun boat by researchers. It resembles boats found in Egyptian and Mesopotamian imagery, used to carry the sun across the sky or through the underworld. But how would a Bronze Age European culture, one supposedly without writing, without trade with the ancient East, know about a sunboat, unless the knowledge was shared, or older than we think? Many archaeologists now believe that the disk may have been part of a vast forgotten knowledge system, perhaps a sacred calendar, or a tool to coordinate planting, harvesting, and rituals with celestial events. But others see something more enigmatic. The star cluster on the disk, the golden arcs, the solstice alignments, they don't just match the sky from 1600 BCE, they align even better with the night sky thousands of years earlier. As if the disk's creators weren't just charting the stars they saw, but preserving the memory of a sky from long ago. How could they know? Unless the disk wasn't made in their time but inherited from a civilization even older. A relic of knowledge from a world we've forgotten, carried forward across dark centuries like a whisper in metal. As the disk traveled from hand to hand, from era to era, it was eventually buried, not discarded, but hidden, as if it were too sacred or too dangerous to be lost completely. Alongside it were ceremonial weapons and jewelry, suggesting a ritualistic burial. Some believe it was an offering, others think it was a tomb, or worse, a sealed warning, because when you step back, the symbolism is uncanny. A disk depicting the heavens, a star map embedded in metal, knowledge of solstices, lunar phases, and sacred geometry, all before the rise of the great empires we usually credit with invention. And here's the strangest part, similar star maps appear in other ancient places, long before anyone had telescopes. In the Lascaux caves in France, dots above painted animals match the Pleiades. In Nabta Playa, Egypt, standing stones align with Sirius and Orion. In Machu Picchu, structures mirror constellations. It's as if these early civilizations shared a common cosmic language, one we no longer understand. Who were the sky mappers? Why did they encode this knowledge into stone, into bronze, into myth? And why does that knowledge resurface again and again in places that had no known contact with one another? Could there have been a lost global system, an ancient science that was passed from culture to culture, surviving catastrophe, preserved by priest kings, astronomer monks, or star-watching cults? Or is the Nebra disk evidence of something even stranger? Some fringe theorists suggest extraterrestrial origin, or that the disk was a kind of communication device, like a compact data record, meant to preserve cosmic truth. Others propose time travel, or the survival of a forgotten civilization, Atlantis, or something older, that once mapped the skies and taught others to remember. But maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe the disk is a mirror, not just of the stars, but of ourselves, a reminder that even in deep prehistory, human beings were looking up, measuring, calculating, wondering, and they found patterns, sacred ones, patterns worth preserving in gold. The Nebra sky disk now rests in a museum, encased in glass, cleaned and catalogued. But it remains largely unknown outside academic circles. It doesn't appear in textbooks. It's not part of popular history, but it should be, because it tells us that civilization might be far older, far more connected, and far more advanced in knowledge, at least in terms of astronomy, than we've been taught. It's a message from a time before the known, a bronze whisper in the dark, saying, "We watched the sky, and we understood more than you think." The clock tower that predates timekeeping. The mystery of the Nuraghi structures in Sardinia and ancient timekeeping enigmas. There is a place where time doesn't seem to move, a forgotten island in the Mediterranean, where the hills are scattered with stone towers that rise like ancient sentinels, watching, waiting, silent. They were built by a people we still know almost nothing about. No written records, no grand monuments, no surviving mythology. And yet, the towers remain. Massive, perfectly stacked stone blocks. Spiral staircases carved into stone without mortar. Small windows placed just so, too precise to be random. And in some of these towers, deep inside their dark interiors, light still filters through once a year, on a specific day, at a specific hour, as if these ancient stones were never meant to stand still, but to mark time. These are the Nuraghi, over 7,000 stone towers spread across the island of Sardinia, but one in particular stands apart from the rest, taller, more complex, more exact. Locals simply call it Su Nuraghi, but some researchers call it something else entirely, the clock tower that predates timekeeping. We're taught that mechanical clocks began in the Middle Ages, that sundials came before that, and that calendars at best trace back to Egypt, to Sumer, maybe to Stonehenge. But what if there was a culture far older that already knew how to track the passage of time? Not just seasons, not just the sun, but hours, minutes, a system of time. And what if they encoded it in stone? Let's step inside. The Su Nuraghi Tower is not just a pile of boulders, it's engineered. An inner chamber rises like a dome, built with precision so exact that even thousands of years later, some of the joints remain watertight. There are passageways that curve upward, spiral stairs hidden between walls, and shafts that pierce the inner sanctum, aligned with where the sun rises on the summer solstice. At exactly that moment, for just a few minutes, a beam of light enters the heart of the tower and strikes the back wall. Why? This isn't an accident. These people, often thought of as primitive islanders, understood something about time, the angle of the light, the position of the stars, the tilt of the earth before such a concept even had a name. In some Nuraghi, researchers have found calendar stones, long horizontal slabs with carefully carved grooves, believed to represent lunar months or solar phases. Others have hypothesized that certain towers functioned as water clocks, with basins that slowly filled and emptied, like an ancient countdown device. Still others suggest sound chambers, where dripping water or the echo of a human voice was used to track intervals, like a pendulum. But it's what they left out that is most baffling. There are no inscriptions, no symbols, no names, as if time itself was their only language. If these towers were just fortresses, they were overbuilt. If they were just religious centers, they were astronomically aligned to a degree that rivals the pyramids. If they were homes, they were placed with too much intention, some aligned to the moonrise, others to the equinox, still others to the constellation Orion. How did they know? Why did they build so many? And why Sardinia? There's a theory, quietly passed around among some researchers, that these towers were part of a larger network, an island-wide system used to track not just solar time, but cosmic cycles, and that one tower, the clock tower at Sunaraxi, was the central node, the master gear in an ancient clock. Consider this: in certain towers, if you stand in the exact center at dawn during the equinox, you can see light travel down the interior corridor in a way that mimics the movement of a sundial's shadow, except there is no dial, and no sun visible. It's the light itself, timed, directed, and intentional, like a celestial trigger, like the mechanism. Even more strangely, the towers appear to have acoustic properties. If you whisper in one part of the chamber, your voice carries across to another spot perfectly, but only on certain days. The echo changes depending on humidity and temperature, and that echo, some believe, was used to measure intervals, a living metronome. But here's the twist: we still don't know who built them. The Nuragic people left behind no written stories. We don't even know what they called themselves. By the time the Romans arrived, these towers were already ancient, and yet the Romans, master builders themselves, were baffled by them. Archaeological dating places the oldest Nuragi around 1800 BCE, though some argue they may be even older, and the layout of the towers suggests an intentional pattern, as if the whole island was being used as a celestial observatory. From certain high towers, you can line up distant peaks and track the movement of Venus, Saturn, and even precession, a concept mainstream science didn't fully grasp until the time of Hipparchus, 1600 years later. What if timekeeping didn't start with clocks? What if it started with architecture? What if some of the oldest buildings in the world weren't temples or palaces, but tools, designed to measure time itself, long before time had numbers? There's something deeply haunting about that idea, that a people we no longer remember on an island most of the world overlooks once tracked the stars and measured the day, in silence, with no words, just stone, light, and shadow. And when their civilization ended, their knowledge didn't spread, it vanished, swallowed by the centuries, erased by time. Ironically, erased by the very thing they tried to understand. So now we stand, thousands of years later, in front of towers we don't understand, calling them mysterious, trying to make sense of the patterns, guessing. But maybe we're not supposed to decode them with computers, or lasers, or charts. Maybe we're supposed to feel them, stand inside the chambers at sunrise, and let the past speak in light and echo. Because once, long ago, someone looked at the sky, and built a clock out of stone, and then they vanished. The chamber that silences all sound. Real anechoic chambers, and deeper ancient architectural acoustic mysteries. There's a sound we're all so used to, we don't even notice it. The hum of electricity, the faint whir of a fan, wind brushing the window, even your own heartbeat, or the soft crackle of your breath. We are never truly in silence, not anymore. But there is a place, hidden from view, buried in the folds of a forgotten ruin, where sound does not travel, where it does not echo, bounce, or even exist. A place where people who enter often leave within minutes, disturbed, not because they were frightened, but because they felt something ancient staring back at them. It has no name in the local tongue, no inscription above the door, just a space, perfect, mathematically exact, and unnervingly quiet. Researchers call it the silence chamber. Some say it is natural, others swear it was built with intention, knowledge, and a purpose we still can't explain. But what if I told you that this silent chamber isn't unique? Across the world, from ancient Egypt to Mesoamerica to the forgotten cliffside sanctuaries of the Himalayas, there are rooms carved in stone where sound behaves strangely, whispers vanish, steps make no noise, even breathing feels distant, and all of them follow patterns. This is not your typical echo chamber. In fact, it is the exact opposite. The most famous modern equivalent exists in Minnesota, an anechoic chamber, purpose-built to absorb 99.99% of all sound. Step inside and you'll hear your heartbeat, your bones creak. Some visitors report hallucinations, disorientation, nausea. No one can last long. But here's what no one talks about. Structures that mimic this effect existed long before soundproofing foam or modern engineering, and they were not used for experiments. They were used for rituals. Let's go back thousands of years. In the deserts of Egypt, beneath a plateau where the stars once aligned perfectly with temples and tombs, sits a narrow hallway, barely shoulder width, leading into a deeper chamber carved into bedrock. Inside, nothing. No paintings, no sarcophagus, just a flat floor, 3 walls, and a high ceiling. When you speak, nothing returns. When you drop a pebble, it vanishes into stillness. Even the air feels dense, like time slows down. Archaeologists dismissed it for decades, calling it a failed burial space or unfinished room. But recent sound mapping revealed that its angles and materials match acoustic dampening structures used in space-age technology. And it gets stranger. In India, inside the stepwells of Adalaj, there are underground pavilions carved 5 stories down. One of these pavilions silences all sound, only in the center. Move 2 feet left or right, and you hear the echo again. But in the heart of it, it's like the world is muted. It's not accidental. The floor is slightly convex, the ceiling angles in just the right way, and the walls are spaced to cancel sound frequencies above 20 Hz, the same range used in early human chanting. What kind of civilization knew how to do this? Now picture this. A traveler, thousands of years ago, enters such a room. He lights a flame, no crackle. He speaks, no echo. He sings, only his voice inside his skull. The silence is unnatural, not peaceful, heavy, as if the space is pressing back. These were not places of rest. They were places of transformation. Across the Andes, near Lake Titicaca, there is a mysterious stone formation called Amaru Muru, the Gate of the Gods. Beside it, smaller chambers are carved into the mountainside, some barely large enough to sit in, but inside one of them, sound does not reflect. Acoustic researchers tested the space. No modern technology was used to shape it, yet it dampens over 90% of external sound. No wildlife enters, no echo returns. Locals say shamans use the chamber for visions, that when deprived of sound, the mind reaches further, and that in perfect silence, the other world becomes louder. Let's talk science for a moment. To create an anechoic effect, a room must cancel reflected sound waves. In modern labs, this requires wedge-shaped foam, spaced precisely to absorb energy. Yet in these ancient chambers, the materials are stone, and somehow, they work just as well. Researchers now believe these chambers exploit the geometry of resonance itself, angles that break waves, surfaces that scatter frequencies, even temperature gradients between walls and ceilings, creating invisible sound traps. But how would ancient builders know this? Did they discover it by accident, trial and error, or was it passed down, knowledge so old it predates even writing? There's something else. Many of these silent chambers are hidden, not marked, not celebrated, not grand. Why build something so complex and bury it? Some believe they were sacred, that the silence was part of a ritual cleansing, removing the noise of the world to hear only your own thoughts. Or something deeper. Some modern monks who've entered ancient silent chambers claim they heard the sound beneath sound, that once you remove all external vibration, the body becomes an antenna. You don't hear with your ears anymore. You feel it in your spine. In 1973, a team studying Himalayan caves found that one chamber created spontaneous theta brainwaves in every subject who entered. Theta waves are associated with deep meditation, altered states, and vivid hallucinations, but this chamber had no electricity, no EM field, just silence. And now, back to the mysterious chamber buried beneath the ruin, the chamber that silences all sound. Archaeologists still can't identify its purpose. It has no ceremonial markings, no burial remains, no items. But those who enter describe the same thing, a sense that you are being observed, that your own thoughts get louder, that the silence isn't empty but full. So what was it for? A healing space? A punishment chamber? A gateway to something unseen? Or perhaps the last trace of a forgotten science? One that understood the power not of sound, but of its absence. Imagine this, long before physics, before music, before architecture as we know it, a people discovered how to shape silence, not to remove sound, but to listen to something else. And maybe, just maybe, these chambers were not just built to silence the world, but to hear the universe whisper back. The stone that sings only during solar eclipses. There's a hill in the middle of nowhere. No signs, no fences, no explanations. Just a single, silent stone, weathered, lichen-covered, and ordinary at first glance. Most people walk past it without a second thought. It's not tall, not carved, not surrounded by ruins or offerings. Just a stone. But those who've stood near it at the right time tell a different story. Because during a solar eclipse, when the sky dims, the air chills, and shadows sharpen into strange shapes, this stone begins to hum. It doesn't ring like a bell. It doesn't chime like metal. It hums. A low, steady vibration, deep in the chest, so quiet you might think you imagined it, until the person next to you hears it too, and then another, until the crowd stands silently, staring at this stone as the sun disappears behind the moon and the earth holds its breath. Locals call it the Cantor Piedra, the singing stone. You'll find it high in the Andes, in a remote valley in northern Peru, near a place the Inca once called sacred. The region is full of mysteries, abandoned temples, forgotten trails, strange carvings, but none more confounding than this. There are no wires, no machinery, no trick, and it only sings during an eclipse. Scientists have tried to explain it. Some say it's piezoelectric, that the pressure of sudden temperature changes triggers tiny internal shifts in quartz veins, producing sound. Others argue it's a kind of resonance, activated by changes in atmospheric pressure when light vanishes and temperature drops. But none of the experiments have replicated the exact sound, and none have explained why it only happens during a full solar eclipse and never at any other time. What makes this stranger is that the stone appears to be placed, not naturally part of the hill. It doesn't match the surrounding geology. Beneath the surface, ground-penetrating radar found a strange pocket of hollow space. Not a cave, not a tunnel, something smaller, more precise. Local legend says the stone is a sky door, a term the Quechua used for places of transition, portals, not necessarily to another place, but to another state of awareness. They say when the sky goes dark and the world quiets, the veil between realities thins, and in that space the stone speaks. It's not the only one. Similar reports come from other parts of the world. A stone in southern India that vibrates only during lunar eclipses, a carved monolith in the Caucasus Mountains said to resonate once every 18 years, a massive dolmen in France that lets out a faint, melodic pulse at the moment of an equinox, all extremely rare, all unproven. So who built them? And why? If the stone is artificial, shaped and placed intentionally, then someone thousands of years ago understood something about eclipses, resonance, and planetary alignment that modern science has only begun to approach, and they encoded that knowledge in rock. This opens a disturbing possibility, that these builders weren't just marking the sky, like ancient astronomers watching the heavens. They were interacting with it, using sound and vibration as part of a system, perhaps a form of technology we no longer recognize. Imagine this. You live in a world without computers, telescopes, or electricity, but you still want to track cycles, seasons, tides, cosmic events. You carve stone, not just with symbols, but to respond, to vibrate, to hum, to signal when something significant is happening. Like an eclipse, like the moment light returns after darkness, like a cosmic heartbeat. It may sound like science fiction, but in 1994, researchers at the University of Minnesota recorded measurable acoustic changes in granite and limestone structures during solar eclipses. They weren't singing, but they weren't silent either. Something shifted, and now acoustic archaeologists are revisiting ancient sites with sensitive equipment, microphones, laser vibrometry, resonance mapping, and at some locations, especially those aligned with solstices or eclipses, they've found subtle vibrations, frequencies too low for the human ear. Infrasound. Infrasound affects the human body. It can induce dizziness, unease, even hallucinations. It may explain some of the ancient world's sacred feelings in temples and caves, but it doesn't explain why the sound would only emerge during a precise astronomical event and be tied to a single carefully placed stone. Could the stone be part of a lost system, one where vibration, geometry, and time were tools, not metaphors? There are theories, fringe theories, yes, but ones that linger. Some suggest these stones are remnants of an ancient global network, a resonance grid, once used to align or tune the Earth itself. That sounds wild, until you realize many of these stones are located near fault lines, magnetic anomalies, or ley lines, that some emit electromagnetic pulses, that others sit precisely at golden ratio intervals from one another. Is it coincidence, or remnants of a forgotten technology, one that didn't use wires or circuits, but vibration and stone? The Inca built with sound in mind. So did the Egyptians, the Mayans, even the builders of Stonehenge. Modern engineers studying these structures are stunned by their acoustic precision, rooms that amplify whispers, chambers that cancel sound, hallways that pulse in rhythm with footsteps. What if this knowledge wasn't just about architecture, but communication? Maybe the singing stone is a message, a time capsule of vibration, a beacon that only activates when the sky tells it to. Maybe the ancients understood that the best way to preserve a message across millennia wasn't through writing or language, but resonance. And maybe, just maybe, it's still speaking. So the next time there's a solar eclipse, if you find yourself in Peru, high in the Andes, away from crowds and lights, listen. As the sky darkens and the wind goes still, crouch beside the Cantor Piedra. You might feel it first, a low hum, like a drumbeat from deep inside the earth. Or maybe, a voice, not speaking words, but reminding us that someone was here long before us, and they were listening too. The stone that opens, but only once a year. There is a small valley, tucked into a forgotten mountain range where the sun touches stone just right, only once each year. It's not marked on tourist maps, and it's not protected behind any grand museum glass, but if you were to stand in that narrow canyon just before the spring equinox, you might witness something no one can explain. A monolithic slab of rock, solid and unbroken for 364 days, splits open, slowly, without sound, as if moved by breath alone, and just as silently, it closes again, for another year. No gears, no visible hinges, no human intervention. They call it La Puerta del Sol Perdido, the gate of the lost sun. At first glance, the stone appears like any other part of the landscape, eroded, gray, cracked like dry skin. It's wide, about 12 feet across and maybe twice that in height. A single vertical seam marks its center, no wider than a fingernail. For most of the year, it blends into the mountain wall, just another geological oddity in a region full of them. But something changes during that brief window in March. As the sun reaches a certain angle and the valley fills with a unique golden light, the seam begins to glow faintly. Witnesses describe it as almost vibrating, like heat rising from asphalt. And then, impossibly, the stone begins to shift. It doesn't crumble or break, it doesn't slide to the side. Instead, it peels open, like two doors swinging inward from the middle, revealing a narrow passage behind it. The effect is so smooth, so deliberate, that engineers who've studied it have questioned whether it's even natural. Some believe the movement is powered by temperature fluctuations within the rock itself, thermal expansion timed precisely with the season. Others suspect groundwater pressure beneath the valley floor is at play, but those explanations break down under closer examination. No hydraulic patterns match the movement. No amount of heat should be able to split granite that thick with such precision. And then there's the most unsettling part, the interior chamber, because when the stone opens, it reveals more than just darkness. The tunnel beyond is carved with a precision that feels impossible for any culture without diamond drills. Straight lines, etched spirals, even polished surfaces in some areas. And yet, the age of the stone suggests it's been untouched for thousands of years. Inside the chamber you'll find nothing modern. No carvings in Latin, no Christian symbols, no signs of medieval or colonial visitation. What you do find, however, are geometric patterns, burned lightly into the walls using a technique we haven't yet identified. These aren't pictographs. They're not representations of animals or gods or kings. They're mathematical, perfect circles, hexagons, waveforms, star-like diagrams with radial symmetry, shapes that suggest a sophisticated understanding of geometry, one far beyond what we thought possible for prehistoric mountain societies. And it gets stranger. On the far wall, opposite the entry slit, is a stone panel, about the size of a window. It's blank, utterly smooth, but when the sun enters the chamber again, only during that single moment each year, it strikes the panel in such a way that a symbol appears. A circle, pierced by 3 arrows, no pigment, no engraving, just light. To date, no one knows how the image is formed. There are no visible lenses, mirrors, or reflectors hidden in the tunnel, just the sunlight, filtered through the gap, landing on polished stone. And then, just minutes later, the doors begin to close. The light fades, the panel goes dark, the chamber is sealed once more, and no amount of force, no tool, no machine, no dynamite has been able to open it until the next equinox. So what is this place? Some say it's a tomb, a solar-aligned burial chamber, meant to commemorate an ancient king or shaman, but there are no remains, no sarcophagi, not even ashes. Others say it's a calendar, a natural timekeeper built with stone, but that wouldn't explain the engineering required to make the doorway move so perfectly, or the optical illusion on the back wall. A more fringe theory posits that the chamber is a receiver, a device designed to collect or transmit information during a very specific solar alignment, perhaps to communicate with something beyond human understanding, perhaps a kind of lock, triggered only by light at the right moment, carrying a message no longer readable. Whatever the answer, one fact remains: the mechanism that causes the stone to move is unknown. The people who carved the interior walls are unknown, and the purpose of the entire structure is completely unknown. But the phenomenon has been recorded now for nearly 60 years, ever since a group of hikers stumbled into the valley by accident in the early 1960s. Their photographs, though grainy and faded, show the same split, the same panel, the same moment of illumination, and every year since, a handful of scientists, mystics, and adventurers return. They wait in silence, watching the stone. Most leave with more questions than answers. Some even claim that in the seconds before the chamber closes, they've heard sounds from within, Subtle tones like wind chimes or glass tapping stone, too faint to record, too surreal to prove. And once the doors shut, they become just that, doors. No amount of technology has revealed what's behind the inner chamber. No drilling attempts have been successful. It's as if the stone resets itself, becoming immovable again until the next light returns. Local legends say the structure was built by the Stone Whisperers, a people long vanished who could sing to the earth and make it move. While archaeologists scoff at the idea, they can't explain the formation either. There are no tool marks, no support beams, no remnants of scaffolding, just a structure buried into the rock, timed with the turning of the planet. Some even question if the chamber was built at all or found. Could it be that this place wasn't carved but uncovered? That an ancient fault line or unknown natural process created the interior space, and someone merely marked it, studied it, and waited? If that's true, then the panel at the back wall isn't a design, it's a discovery. A naturally occurring effect mistaken for something mystical, then surrounded with ritual. But again, no natural phenomenon yet discovered produces a temporary image on smooth granite with such precision and regularity. So here we are, a door that opens itself, a symbol revealed by sunlight, a chamber carved with mathematical shapes thousands of years before they should have existed, and a mystery that resets every spring. The stone remains closed today, still, cold, ordinary to the untrained eye, but in that one brief moment each year the mountain remembers, and in that silence, in that perfect light, it whispers secrets we no longer speak. The crystal lens buried in a 3,000-year-old grave, buried deep beneath layers of time, dust and forgotten memory, there lies an object so precise, so quietly impossible, that it continues to puzzle the very people who unearthed it. The story begins in the 19th century, at a site not far from ancient Nineveh, one of the great cities of Assyria. Archaeologists were working carefully, slowly removing layers of earth from the remnants of what appeared to be a royal chamber. The palace itself had long since crumbled, walls buckled inward, ceilings collapsed, scrolls turned to ash or brittle fragments. But under one of the burial chambers, nestled within the grave goods of what seemed to be a high-ranking court official, they found a small object. It wasn't made of gold. It wasn't adorned with carvings. It didn't shine like a jewel. It was simple, oval, transparent, a little larger than a coin. But when someone picked it up and held it to the light, it bent the world. At first they thought it might be a drop of polished quartz, but as they examined it closer, they realized it was a lens, a true working lens, perfectly curved, capable of magnifying images. Its focal length was short but effective. The edges were deliberately beveled, the surface highly polished. Later researchers would call it the Nimrud lens, named after the site near Nimrud in modern-day Iraq where it was found. But the real question wasn't about what it was about how. The lens was dated to around 750 BCE, nearly 3,000 years ago. This was long before the invention of modern optics, before Galileo, before the microscope, before lenses were ever part of our science. So why was one buried in a grave? Some researchers suggest it could have been used as a magnifying glass for fine work, perhaps for engraving tiny scripts or inspecting jewelry. Others think it might have been used to start fires, focusing sunlight into a hot point, like a modern-day survival tool. But none of those ideas quite explain its presence in a burial, or its craftsmanship. You see, ancient lenses aren't completely unheard of. There have been rumors, fragments here and there, sometimes dismissed, sometimes ignored. But the Nimrud lens was intact, smooth, precise, optical. It raises a chilling question. Were the ancients experimenting with lenses long before we thought? And if so, what did they see? Let's pause here. Close your eyes for a moment and picture an Assyrian craftsman, sitting by a small oil lamp in a palace chamber. In his hand is a lump of rock crystal. He's turning it, shaping it, polishing it slowly with cloth and powder until the surface shines. He's not guessing. He's not stumbling through trial and error. He knows exactly what he's doing. But how? Some believe the lens is evidence of a forgotten science, an early experiment in optics passed down from even older cultures. Others wonder if the lens was used in religious rituals. Could it have been used to focus sunlight through incense smoke, to magnify the face of a statue, to reveal something hidden in a sacred tablet? Even more mysteriously, some researchers argue that similar lenses may have existed in ancient Egypt and even in Minoan Crete. But without surviving documentation, these ideas remain in the shadows, half-formed, half-believed. And yet the more we study ancient art, the more strange clues appear. Have you ever noticed how detailed the eyes are in certain ancient sculptures? Some statues seem to have an unnerving realism, as if the sculptors saw something far clearer than the human eye can manage on its own. Could they have been using lenses? The official explanation, of course, is no. There is no proof, they say, no written record, no workshops, no manuals, but history rarely leaves behind instructions. Most of what we know about the past is a mosaic of fragments, and sometimes all it takes is one forgotten object, one impossible detail, to crack the illusion wide open. There's more. When British museum researchers studied the Nimrud lens, they discovered that it had asymmetrical curvature. That meant it wasn't just random polishing. One side was flatter, the other more curved, creating a simple convex lens with basic magnification capabilities. Now imagine if there were dozens of lenses made this way, used by elite craftsmen, or even priests, not for science, but for ritual. Imagine if some were used to project symbols, or interpret celestial movements, or focus light during rare moments like eclipses. It gets deeper. In the same region where the lens was found, ancient tablets described the positions of stars with remarkable precision. The Assyrians tracked Venus, Jupiter, and the Moon with incredible accuracy. Some modern astronomers have been baffled by just how correct those calculations were. Were they simply observing with the naked eye, or were they using tools? The Nimrud lens is small, about 4 centimeters long, and a few millimeters thick, but its implications are vast. If real lenses existed thousands of years ago, and were used for religious, scientific, or artistic purposes, then much of what we believe about the timeline of optics needs to be reevaluated. So why don't we hear about it? Because it doesn't fit the neat narrative of progress. We like to think of human knowledge as linear, gradual, logical, but the truth is messier. Ideas get discovered, lost, and rediscovered again. Entire sciences can vanish, civilizations can collapse, tools can be buried with their makers, and knowledge once erased can take millennia to return. And in that silence, stories are born. Some say the Nimrud lens is proof of a forgotten science. Others believe it came from an even older civilization, one that existed long before Assyria, and whose traces were buried by time, war, and erosion. A few even suggest it was gifted by beings not of this world, though that, of course, cannot be proven. What we do know is this: the lens exists. You can visit it at the British Museum. It's there behind glass, real, tangible, quiet. It doesn't shout for attention. But once you understand what it is, it's hard to look away. So the next time you hear someone say that ancient people were primitive, pause, remember that tiny crystal object buried in a grave, and remember the people who once held it, used it, and then left it behind for us to find, thousands of years later. In the end, the Nimrud lens may be a fragment of a forgotten world, one where science and spirituality were intertwined, and where seeing the unseen meant far more than just vision. It meant understanding, reverence, power, and perhaps the beginnings of a truth still waiting to come into focus. Perfectly carved tunnels, deep beneath the Andes. There's a place where the mountains open up, not above but below. Beneath the high ridges of the Andes, far from any modern city, lie tunnels. Not natural caves, not crevices formed by earthquakes or water. These are engineered, cut through solid rock, smooth, angled, perfect, and no one knows who made them or why. You wouldn't stumble upon these tunnels by chance. They're buried beneath some of the most remote terrain on Earth. The Andes are brutal and majestic, cold, thin air, dangerous slopes, and yet deep beneath them is a network of underground passages that stretches for miles. Locals have always known about them, and for generations they've warned people to stay away. Some say the tunnels go so deep you can walk for days without seeing sunlight. Others say they're haunted by whatever once used them. But the strangest thing isn't the legends, it's the tunnels themselves. They're carved too precisely for the tools we know ancient civilizations had. Walls are smooth, angles are sharp, some passages even curve in ways that match modern mining tunnels, yet they were made thousands of years ago. The entrance to one of the most mysterious of these tunnels lies near Cuzco, Peru. Cuzco was once the heart of the Inca Empire, but the Incas themselves believed they inherited the land from a much older people they called the Chachapoya, or sometimes the Cloud People, a culture now almost entirely lost. In the hills around Cuzco, near a place called Sacsayhuaman, a narrow opening leads underground. Locals call it the Snake's Mouth. At first it's just a tight corridor, but soon it opens up into a wide hallway, with smooth walls of black basalt. Basalt is not soft stone, it's one of the hardest natural materials to cut. And yet these tunnels are cleanly carved, with no chisel marks, no signs of hammering. Some passages continue for hundreds of meters. Others descend steeply, deeper into the mountain. Archaeologists have tried to explore them, but most expeditions are short-lived. The air grows thin, the paths grow confusing, And then there's the legend, the one that makes explorers hesitate. They say that during the Spanish conquest, a group of invaders followed the Incas into these tunnels, chasing gold. None of them returned. Only one Inca emerged weeks later, barely alive. His eyes were wild. He claimed the tunnels didn't just go underground. They led somewhere else, somewhere not made for humans. Strange story, but what's real is this. Several European expeditions in the 1800s attempted to map these Andean tunnel networks. One of them, led by a man named Juan Moritz in the 1960s, claimed to discover metal plates, carved walls, even what looked like an underground library, thousands of sheets of engraved metal with unknown symbols. His findings were never verified. He refused to give up the location. Then he vanished from public view. Others who searched after him couldn't find the same chambers. Some said he was lying. Others believed he was silenced. Then, in the 1970s, the Shuar people of Ecuador, living near the border of Peru, told explorers of a sacred underground world. They said the old ones created the tunnels long before the Inca, that they were not meant to be entered casually, that they protected something ancient, not gold, not treasure, but knowledge, or danger, or both. Even today, satellite scans show strange gaps under the Andes, linear anomalies, as if someone had built straight corridors underground, then covered them. But how could a prehistoric culture have done that? The rock is too hard, the altitude too extreme, and the scale too vast. This is not a single cave. These are networks. Some estimates suggest they stretch for hundreds of miles, from southern Peru into northern Chile. One tunnel near the town of Tayos appears to run for over 2 kilometers, perfectly level. No slope, no natural formation behaves like that. So how were they made? One theory is that these tunnels were melted, not carved. That whoever made them used some kind of unknown heat-based tool to soften the rock and push through it. Sound too advanced? Maybe. But several tunnel walls show signs of vitrification. The stone looks glassy, almost melted, like it was exposed to intense, controlled heat. No ancient civilization in the Andes is known to have used such technology, and yet here it is, preserved in darkness. Others believe the tunnels are much, much older than we think. Not Inca, not pre-Inca, but remnants of a civilization that existed before even the last ice age. That would make them over 12,000 years old. If true, it would rewrite history. The mainstream response to all this is cautious. Archaeologists argue that many of these tunnels may be misunderstood natural lava tubes, or simply enhanced by ancient people using basic tools. But no tools have ever been found, and some of the most advanced tunnel segments are far below the surface, accessible only by crawling, climbing, and squeezing through near impossible passages. What would drive anyone to build like this? Some think the tunnels were escape routes, paths that allowed ancient people to flee invaders or natural disasters. Others suggest they were ceremonial, guiding shamans into the underworld, but none of these explanations account for the sheer scale and precision. There's even a theory that the tunnels connect to something hidden deep beneath the mountains, a sealed chamber, a vault. Some believe the Incas' greatest treasure, the one never found by the Spanish, is not in a city, but buried at the end of these tunnels, protected by traps and misdirection. But here's the problem: very few have ever reached the deeper levels. Over the years, several explorers have entered and never returned. Some got lost. Others turned back after claiming to hear voices, metallic sounds, or even feeling the air pressure shift, as if there were vast open spaces ahead, too big to be natural. One researcher described the tunnels as feeling engineered like a machine, everything symmetrical, angles clean, no signs of erosion, and every now and then small alcoves, just big enough to stand in, as if someone stood guard. There are no lights, no air shafts. Yet the tunnels maintain breathable conditions far underground. How? If these are natural, they defy nature. If they're man-made, they defy history. Today, most entrances are closed off or overgrown. Some have collapsed. Others have been quietly sealed by authorities, with no explanation. A few remain open, but you'll need local guides. And even then, many will refuse to go far. They believe the tunnels are protected, not by traps, but by something else, something they won't name. And the more you dig into this mystery, the more it feels like we're seeing only the surface of something much deeper, literally and historically. A network of precision tunnels under one of the world's oldest mountain ranges, created with unknown technology, serving an unknown purpose and still unexplored. It's the kind of thing you expect in fiction, but this isn't fiction. This is real rock, real structure, real mystery. And tonight, if you ever walk alone in the Andes, listen closely. Some say the mountains hum, a vibration from deep within, a sound not from the surface, but from the tunnels below. The lost chamber beneath the Sphinx, Egypt's forbidden room of records. There's something about the Sphinx that feels older than it should be. Not just the way it stares out across the desert with weathered calm, or how it towers over tourists in silence, but in the way it doesn't quite belong. It looks ancient, yes, but also out of place, almost like it was there before Egypt existed. And that's not just a poetic observation. Over the decades, researchers, archaeologists, and curious minds have all come to the same unsettling question. Why is the Sphinx so eroded when the pyramids beside it are still sharp and defined? And what lies beneath this strange monument that continues to hold its secrets even as satellites map the Earth in full color? Because according to some, beneath the Sphinx is a hidden chamber, sealed off, undisturbed, and possibly older than all recorded history. Let's go deeper. For centuries, stories of hidden rooms beneath the Giza Plateau have circulated through Egyptian lore and esoteric writings, but the one that continues to fascinate most is often referred to as the Hall of Records, a room said to contain scrolls, tablets, or possibly even technology from a time before our own. Not just ancient Egypt, but a civilization that predates everything we know. The modern theory of the Hall of Records gained traction in the early 20th century, thanks to a man named Edgar Cayce, sometimes called the Sleeping Prophet. Cayce was a mystic who claimed to have visions while in a trance-like state. He spoke of a great civilization known as Atlantis, and how its survivors built monuments in Egypt to preserve their knowledge. He claimed that beneath the Sphinx, one of those survivors had hidden a chamber filled with lost wisdom, maps of the stars, forgotten science, and the true history of humankind. At the time, mainstream scholars dismissed this as fantasy, but then something strange happened. In the 1990s, seismic surveys were conducted around the base of the Sphinx. These weren't mystical readings, they were hard geological data. Teams from both the US and Egypt worked together, sending sound waves into the ground to detect empty pockets or anomalies. And the results were surprising. Underneath the Sphinx's front paws, researchers found what they described as a rectangular cavity, artificially shaped and surrounded by denser material. It didn't match any known tunnel, tomb, or shaft, just a room, hollow, sealed. The Egyptian government acknowledged the finding, but then access was denied. Permits to excavate were blocked. Further research was discouraged. The official stance? Nothing significant had been found, but that doesn't sit right with everyone. Why shut down access to a potentially groundbreaking archaeological discovery, especially one right beneath one of the world's most famous landmarks? What is it about this cavity that officials don't want explored? Some believe the answer lies in control, because if the Hall of Records truly exists, if there really is a chamber holding knowledge from a forgotten age, it would upend everything we think we know about Egypt, about history, about civilization itself. It would mean the ancient Egyptians were not the first, but the inheritors. It would mean history doesn't start at 3000 BCE, but somewhere far earlier, possibly even 10,000 or 12,000 years ago. And this lines up with what geologists have said about the Sphinx's weathering. The deep vertical erosion patterns on its sides don't match the dry desert winds. They match rain, heavy long-term rain. But Egypt hasn't had that kind of climate in thousands of years, not since around 10,500 BCE. If that dating is correct, the Sphinx is far older than the pyramids, far older than dynastic Egypt, and it opens a question no one seems to want to answer. Who built it? Back to the chamber. Though denied direct access, some explorers have pushed forward through indirect means, drones, robotics, and even satellite imaging. One independent team claimed that the chamber isn't just rectangular, but lined with what appear to be smooth, straight walls, the kind that don't occur naturally. Another claim suggested a corridor branching off underground from the chamber, heading west, possibly toward the Great Pyramid itself. Again, nothing official was confirmed, but none of it was denied either. Silence has become the standard response. There are also ancient texts that hint at what may lie beneath. The inventory stela, discovered near the pyramids, refers to the Sphinx as existing long before Khufu, the pharaoh traditionally credited with building the Great Pyramid. It also speaks of repairing the monument, not building it, meaning it was already ancient even in ancient times. And that's where the Hall of Records theory gains momentum, because if the Sphinx was constructed by an earlier people, possibly survivors of a lost global event such as a flood, an asteroid impact, or a sudden climate collapse, they may have encoded their story in the chamber beneath, not with myth, but with evidence. Imagine a stone library filled with star charts, devices or records of civilizations we've never heard of, maps of coastlines before the ice caps melted, instructions on harnessing sound or energy in ways we can't yet comprehend. That's the promise of the Hall of Records. But what if it's already been opened? This is where the theories turn darker. Some believe that the chamber was accessed secretly in the 20th century by private groups, and its contents removed or hidden. There are whispers of sudden military interest in Giza in the 1950s. Some photographs suggest disturbed soil near the Sphinx's base around that time, though no excavations were ever officially logged. And then there's the long-standing rumor that one of Egypt's most powerful institutions, the Supreme Council of Antiquities, has made deals to suppress certain discoveries in exchange for maintaining Egypt's cultural narrative. Again, none of this is proven, but the pattern is familiar: a discovery, a denial, and then silence. So we're left with questions. Why is the chamber beneath the Sphinx off limits? Why do seismic scans show something there, something geometric and hollow? And why does every attempt to investigate it further get quietly shut down? Some think the world isn't ready for the truth, that the story we've been told, that civilization began in Mesopotamia, that the pyramids were the pinnacle of ancient knowledge, that the past is fully understood, is a comfort more than a reality. Because if the Hall of Records is real, then it means we're not the first, and we may not be the most advanced. It means the past is not a straight line but a cycle. Civilizations rise, they fall, and sometimes they leave messages for the next ones. Maybe we're that next one. Maybe that chamber is waiting for us to be ready, and maybe, just maybe, one day someone will finally open the door beneath the Sphinx and discover not just artifacts but the truth. Until then, the desert holds its silence. But the stones, they remember. The forgotten vault that was built before the pharaohs. In the desert, silence doesn't just exist. It spreads, it fills the air, seeps into the sand, and lingers in the bones of ancient structures left untouched for thousands of years. Just beyond the better-known ruins of Saqqara, not far from the step pyramid of Djoser, there's a largely unexcavated plateau that doesn't attract much attention. Tourists pass by it, guidebooks barely mention it, but underground, hidden beneath layers of rock and secrecy, there's a vault. And no one can say for sure who built it. This underground structure, now referred to as the Serapeum, was first rediscovered in the 1800s. Initially, it was thought to be a burial chamber for sacred Apias bulls, worshipped in ancient Egypt. But the further archaeologists dug, the more questions began to pile up. Massive granite boxes were found, perfectly carved and weighing up to 100 tons each. The corridors that led to them were equally strange, cut with almost laser-like precision into the bedrock, with perfectly flat walls and symmetrical turns, far beyond what tools of the time should have allowed. But what baffled researchers even more was this: there are no inscriptions on most of the boxes, no carvings, no hieroglyphs, no names, just smooth, polished stone, almost as if someone wanted them hidden forever. And then there's the timeline. Although mainstream archaeologists still place the Serapeum's construction in the 13th century BCE, new studies of tool marks, granite sourcing, and erosion patterns hint at something older, much older, possibly predating the dynastic Egyptians entirely. Some engineers who've examined the structure say replicating the precision of these stone boxes today would require industrial-level technology. So the question becomes, who built this, and why? Most tombs in Egypt contain statues, treasures, sarcophagi. But here, it's the boxes themselves that seem to be the point. They're sealed tight, too tight for ropes or levers. No one knows how the lids, many of which weigh over 30 tons, were placed so precisely, or how the interiors were polished in total darkness. And the placement of these vaults isn't random. They follow a pattern, mathematically perfect, spaced out like an encoded map. Some have proposed that they were designed to hold not bulls, but something else entirely, something once considered too dangerous or too valuable to expose to light. Theories range from ancient energy storage devices to quarantine chambers for forgotten technologies. Stranger still, one of the boxes was found open, empty. No explanation, no markings, as if someone had taken something from it, long before we found the chamber. Outside the main corridor, explorers have noted sealed passageways leading even deeper underground, but most of them remain untouched, either because of danger, unstable conditions, or deliberate restriction. Some locals believe that below the Serapeum lies a second level, a place that has never been opened in modern times, and even if it was, would we recognize what we found? This vault doesn't just challenge archaeology, it shatters it. The geometry, the weight, the silence. Everything about it feels wrong for its age. The ancients called it sacred. Some say it was forbidden. But the Serapeum might be more than a mystery. It could be a message. One buried beneath centuries of sand and secrecy, waiting for someone someday to finally understand. Even if that person isn't from this time. The desert machine that shouldn't exist. In the heart of the Syrian desert, where winds whisper through abandoned ruins and the heat warps the air itself, lies a place so ancient and obscure that most maps don't even bother to name it. A few broken stones, a scattering of columns, and a forgotten hill. There's nothing here to draw attention. And yet, buried beneath this desolation is something that refuses to be ignored. It was found in fragments, bent metal, gears fused into rock, and small copper pieces coated in desert minerals. A team of archaeologists, exploring the outskirts of an ancient Roman outpost near Palmyra, had stumbled upon a tightly clustered mass of corroded parts lodged deep in sediment that hadn't been disturbed in thousands of years. At first they thought it might be a Roman weapon or an early water wheel, but when the pieces were analyzed, the story changed completely, because the components didn't match anything from the Roman era or any known civilization. The device, as reconstructed today, resembles a complex arrangement of interlocking wheels, sliders, and pressure-based mechanisms. Its closest comparison isn't anything ancient, it's modern, shockingly so. Something you'd expect to find in a 19th century laboratory or an early industrial workshop, but the dating? That's what unsettled the experts. Carbon dating from the surrounding soil placed the layers firmly in the 3rd millennium BCE, at least 4,000 years before the rise of mechanical engineering. And the metallurgy was even more confusing. The alloy used in the gearwork had traces of tungsten, an element rarely found in ancient artifacts and requiring temperatures that early forges couldn't achieve. This wasn't a ceremonial object or a symbolic sculpture. This was a machine, and it worked. When the fragments were reconstructed digitally, engineers realized that the components could have formed a type of pump or possibly a device that converted pressure into rotary motion. A few even believed it may have been part of a larger system, like an underground water generator or some kind of early pressure engine. Theories spiraled quickly. If this was part of a larger infrastructure, where was the rest of it? What was it powering? Then came the more disturbing question: who built it? No known civilization in that area at that time had the knowledge to produce such complexity, and the settlement found nearby didn't have the hallmarks of an advanced society. No cities, no factories, no signs of large-scale engineering. Just a handful of dwellings and scattered tombs, mostly empty. But in one of those tombs, buried beneath collapsed stone, was something even stranger: a perfectly smooth disc, black as obsidian, with a tiny hole drilled dead center. Its surface showed no tool marks. It wasn't made of stone, but a composite material that hadn't degraded. Its shape was mathematically flawless. It was as if it had been 3D printed, and nobody could explain how it got there. Some called it the desert machine, while others began referring to it as the Syrian anomaly. One researcher who worked on the team described holding the gear fragments in her hand and feeling like I was looking at something left behind by a traveler from another time. The mainstream scientific community, as expected, was hesitant to accept the implications. The machine was dismissed as out of context or labeled a likely contamination. Someone must have dropped it there from a modern site, but the dating didn't lie, the geological layering didn't lie, and the corrosion pattern on the metal matched ancient desert conditions, not anything recent. Even stranger, satellite scans later revealed symmetrical lines beneath the surface, straight geometric channels stretching over a kilometer beneath the sand. When ground-penetrating radar was used, the team picked up hollow areas, possible chambers, sealed and untouched, but before any excavation could begin, the entire area was declared a restricted archaeological zone. The reason? Preservation of fragile structures. All access was cut off. Today, the fragments are locked away in storage under a preservation grant. Officially, no one's working on them anymore. Unofficially, a few whispers in the right academic circles say something bigger was found in those underground lines, something that has never been shown to the public. The desert machine still has no official classification, no inventor, no civilization tied to it, and no reason to exist. Except maybe to remind us of something unsettling, that human history, at least the version we're told, isn't complete, not even close. Sometimes the machines come before the minds that can understand them, and sometimes they're not meant to be found at all. The wall that shouldn't exist, carved into solid mountain without tools. Deep within a remote mountain range in Eastern Europe, where snow clings to jagged stone and forests stretch unbroken for miles, there lies a wall that doesn't match anything around it. At first glance, it looks like a natural ridge, a strange formation caused by the shifting of the earth. But the closer you get, the more unnatural it becomes. Smooth surfaces where rock should be rough, long linear cuts stretching perfectly parallel for meters at a time. Not a wall built on the mountain. This one was carved into it. No signs of pick marks. No signs of modern machinery. No quarry nearby, just a solid granite wall buried into the heart of the mountain, completely isolated, precisely shaped, and eerily silent. Locals call it the ridge that speaks. Not because it makes any sound, but because of the way people describe their experience standing next to it. Goosebumps, pressure in the ears, even sudden nausea. It wasn't discovered by scientists. In fact, no formal expedition ever announced it. The earliest mention comes from a shepherd's journal written in 1872. He had followed a stray goat off trail and ended up describing a flat stone fence buried in the hill, straighter than any made by men. Nothing came of the entry, just another note in a forgotten book. But in the 1980s, a hiking group led by a geologist stumbled onto the same formation. One of the members, an amateur archaeologist, noticed something strange. The wall wasn't just flat, it was jointed, segmented into interlocking blocks that fit too tightly to slide a razor blade between them. Massive stones, each weighing several tons, carved to match the angles of the ones around them. Yet the material was not laid in place, it was carved out of a single mountain face. There was no rubble, no tool marks, and no apparent purpose. Satellite thermal scans later revealed something even stranger. The wall wasn't just on the surface, it extended deep dozens of meters into the rock. Behind it, tunnels, cavities, hollowed-out chambers that snaked beneath the mountain for an unknown distance. But when researchers tried to explore them physically, their equipment failed. Drones lost signal, batteries drained within minutes, audio sensors picked up nothing, not even echo. Theories began to swirl. Some believed it was the remnant of a Cold War bunker, though the precision of the stonework didn't match the rough-cut concrete of the era. Others thought it was a Nazi facility, until historical aerial footage showed the wall existed long before World War II. Geological dating offered the biggest surprise. Carbon trapped in sediment layers nearby dated to over 12,000 years ago. That's before writing, before agriculture, before history.